The Book of Boba Fett Chapter 2 is titled The Tribes of Tatooine, and I can't even give any more fluff to this opening. I just have to say that this is the best episode of anything Star Wars I have ever seen. This episode absolutely blew me away. We start right where we left off, with Fennec bringing the assassin into Boba's palace and placing him before Boba, where he begins to question him. We learn that the assassin refuses to speak, until he's threatened with the Rancor, which of course is no longer there. After giving up that the mayor is the one that hired him to assassinate Boba, Boba suits up and decides to pay a visit. This is literally where all of this clicked in my head. This is really going to be an underworld mafia-styled story. Boba Fett thinks he can just walk in and instantly have power, but that is not how this works. After visiting with the mayor, he claims that he has no motive to send any assassins after Boba, but gives him some advice, saying that running a family is more complicated than bounty hunting. And this is how the story should go. Everyone on Tatooine who sits in a place of power knows how they got there, and how it wasn't simply just given to them. And for Boba to come in and just try to claim it, it doesn't really work. Boba has to work to earn this respect and power. The mayor tells him to go to Garsa's sanctuary. There he will be able to understand what the mayor means by this. Boba and Fennec arrive at the sanctuary, where Boba then decides to start asking questions about what is really going on here, only to discover that the twins have seized control of the area. The twins of course being twin Hutts who were related to Jabba, and now are attempting to come in and claim Mos Espa back. They never really recognized Bib Fortuna as the successor to Jabba, nor do they recognize Boba, and they plan to do whatever it takes to remove him, including intimidation with a very scary looking Wookiee bounty hunter. That is unfortunately all we get from the present time of this episode. The rest of it is spent in another dream as Boba rests in his bacta tank. But unlike the first episode, this is the exact flashback I was hoping for. Boba has finally earned some respect within the Tuscan tribe and begins learning how to fight with a gaffy stick. The lead Tuscan female trains him, and the whole scene is just perfect. It's not like most training scenes where the student gets irritated and tries to quit halfway through. Boba insists on wanting to learn the proper way to hold the gaffy stick and how he can use it correctly to ensure victory. Their training session is then interrupted, and by an actual train. But this was something unexpected. It's a hover train used by the Pike Syndicate, and as they pass by, they proceed to open fire on the Tuscans. Later that night, Boba helps the Tuscans burn the bodies of the dead and notices the swoop gang from the first episode passing in the night. Boba decides to strike a deal with the chief, explaining that he can stop the train and will be back by sunrise with the equipment to do so. Boba makes his way to a small outpost cantina where the swoop gang is making a mess of the place. A couple inside is trying to enjoy their evening when the man stands up to the gang and explains that what they're doing is not right. The gang members start beating on him, but he is unexpectedly saved by Boba, who simply walks in and beats the living hell out of all of the gang members, leaving them all unconscious. And without saying a single word, leaves the cantina, tying all of their bikes together and riding them back to the Tuscan camp. He then explains his plan. By gifting the bikes to the Tuscans, he can teach them how to ride and use them to take down the Pike's train. His plan quickly gets to go into action as the train soon returns and Boba leads the assault. Much like the feel of a classic heist movie and very reminiscent of Solo: A Star Wars Story, the Tuscans drive up to the train and climb on board, making their way to the front of the train while taking out all of the Pikes who attempt to stop them. It's not an easy task, however, as the droid driving the train continuously speeds up the train in hopes of knocking them off of the top. Boba hops into the front and is able to stop the train, but the droid jumps ship and is able to escape, which gives me the feeling that we may be seeing more of the Pikes later in the show. The Tuscans take the rest of the Pikes hostage, and Boba takes charge, asking for the leader to stand up, and then proceeds to ask if they're carrying spice. The leader of the group attempts to play dumb, but the Tuscans accidentally uncover the spice, blowing whatever plan the Pike leader may have had. Boba decides to spare the Pikes, giving them each a black melon and telling them to walk single file towards the sun, leading them to Anchorhead. With the Pikes gone, the train is now left to the Tuscans to dismantle and take what they like, including their entire water car. Back of the tribe, we learn the sad fate of the Tuscans. This specific tribe explains that since the seas dried up, they have stayed hidden to survive. Boba tries to level with the chief by saying that they are warriors and that they shouldn't have to hide, but the chief explains that the off-worlders have machines, And that's where I instantly felt heartbreak for the Tuscans. They are the true inhabitants of Tatooine. Everyone else came from other planets, and because of their culture, they were treated like savages and their land was taken from them, leaving them to hide out in the Dune Sea, and it's just really upsetting. From both The Mandalorian and now the Book of Boba Fett, we can clearly see that the Tuscans are not just mindless monsters, they are simply misunderstood. The last 14 minutes of the episode are an absolute trip and really insane. The chief presents a gift to Boba, a lizard that he says will guide him, but only after they throw spice in Boba's face while the lizard crawls directly into his nose. Now under the influence of the spice, Boba wanders aimlessly through the Dune Sea in the middle of the night until he comes across a tree, where he then starts showing PTSD symptoms as he believes the tree is beginning to grab him, reminding him of the Sarlacc pit. He tries to fight it as much as he can, but eventually he accepts his fate. The next morning, Boba returns with a branch from the tree and presents it to the female Tuscan, where he is then taken inside and dressed in Tuscan robes, the same robes we see him wearing in Season 2 of The Mandalorian. He then meets with the female Tuscan, where he uses their smithing techniques to create his own gaffy stick. With this rite of passage, he is initiated as a member of the tribe as they dance around a bonfire in the night, ending the episode. This episode was just awesome, phenomenal, superb, really any word you want to use. We got so much from this episode and I loved every single minute of it. I love seeing how Boba is going to have to fight for his place as ruler and that it's not something that he can just have. I absolutely loved seeing how Boba earned the full respects of the Tuscan Raiders, and of course learning more about their culture was just incredible. This episode easily dethrones last week's episode, and if it's a sign of what is to come, the Book of Boba Fett is aiming for my #1 spot on my list of Star Wars TV shows. I could go on about this episode for hours, but I unfortunately have to stop myself. But I want to know, what were your thoughts? Is the story in both present and past bringing the show up to par with your expectations? Would you want to see more of these flashbacks in future episodes, or are you hoping they eventually start to fade? Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments below. As always, be sure to like the video and subscribe if you haven't, and remember, the Force will be with you, always.